don't know what you just did. Some of you have heard this before and some of you haven't. When I was getting ordained, I come from a Baptist faith. And women in where I come from are not to be ministers. And I was sitting in the family room of my classmate, Brenda Harder, in Detroit. And Phil was there with me, but none of my family came. And feeling sorry for myself that day. And my daughter and my niece and great niece were on their way. But feeling sorry for myself, sitting at a table with some other Unity Urban Ministerial School students, Brenda Harder and I getting ready to get ordained, Karen Saunders soon to be was being ordained, and the others were students coming behind us in the urban school. And all of a sudden my mind went to, if I were a man in my faith, my whole family probably would have come to see my ordination. Just, you know, a little pity party. You ever have those? You know, a little pity party. Poor, poor, pitiful me. And so as I had that thought, Jeanette Bonin, who's now Associate Minister at Unity of Minneapolis with, I think in Minneapolis, well, she was a student, and she said to me, if I tell you something, would you promise not to get mad? And I said, well, I don't know what you could tell me to make me mad. She said, well, I have to say this. She said, your father is here, and he wants you to know he's proud of you. Now, my father was murdered at the age of 60 when I was 25 years old on Christmas Eve. And the night before he was killed, he asked me to sit on his lap. And he said, you're special and you're going places, and I wish I could live to see it. But if I don't live to see it, remember one thing, you're nobody if you can't help somebody. Now, I never went to church with my dad. My mom said when they were younger in Louisiana and a young family, he went to church every Sunday, knew the Bible like the back of his hand, could recite every book from backwards to forwards. But I never witnessed that. She also said he could sing. I never heard it. But that day, that night, he stood up and sang, my living will not be in vain. And every time somebody sings that song, I know he's here. And I know he's saying, I'm proud of you. So this is in honor of the late, great Grady Wayne Sr., my dad. He was quite a character and a great joke teller. So I try to emulate him and make him really proud. So you're driving down the street in a brand new car. Beautiful car, just had it detailed, just had it waxed, and it just is shining like a light. And all of a sudden, and I know this has happened to me, a bird poops on your car. Now there is something to be grateful for. Thank God cows can't fly. So today, you may not know this, is National Clergy Appreciation Day. It really is. It started in 1992, and it's a day set aside in the United States, the second Sunday in October, when we honor our ministers, our clergy, our reverends, our priests. And so I'm honoring Duke today. This is Sock It to Poverty with some socks, just in case he needs them. You can always use socks. And I also have, just for your enjoyment and not during the service, a little breakfast bar for you. So let's honor our senior minister today. I wouldn't be standing here if it weren't for this man. Like my dad, he saw something in me years ago that I didn't see in myself. And I would sit out there and I'd take my bulletin and I wrote all over my bulletin. I just was hungry for all of this truth. And one day I wanted to be up here with Duke, but I never told him that. He told me. And that was years ago. So, you know, there's always something for everybody. If you look it up, if you Google it, there's a day for everything. Do you know that National Boyfriend Day was October 3rd? So if you don't have a boyfriend, you missed your opportunity. National Coming Out Day was October 11th, so if you haven't come out, you're going to have to wait till next year. The Sweetest Day is October 19th, so you got time to find somebody to be sweet to or who'll be sweet to you, so write that down. Somebody's looking for you to give them something or do something nice, give them a kiss. Now, I have a grand cat. His name is Basil. Basil is a Bombay, and he's really a person. So on the 29th of October, we're going to celebrate National Cat Day. We'll get Basil some extra treats, maybe some wet food. He loves that. National Cookie Day, December 4th. Now, this is an unusual one I saw. Hootie Hoo Day, February 20th. So on February 20th, I expect all of you, I don't know whether that's a Sunday or not, but if it is, come to church and go, Hootie Hoo! It's Hootie Hoo Day. And National Chocolate Chip Day is May 15th. I'm not waiting because I love chocolate chip cookies, so I'm going to celebrate that almost every day. I try to skip a day now and then. So who makes this stuff up? I have no idea. But last Sunday, Duke mentioned our common Norwegian heritage. So I've been studying in order to communicate more effectively with Duke the language that he understands, because I don't know if you notice this, but a lot of times we're singing, he's singing it in Norwegian. Da, ya, you know, that kind of thing. So, now, I looked up some words, and I don't know if I have the pronunciation right, but I'm practicing because we're relatives, and I want to make sure you understand me. So, you know, I've heard my cousins and even my sisters-in-law would say a lot of times years ago, dag, you know, like dag gum, like dag. Well, I didn't know dag is Norwegian. It's God dag. Now that sounds like a cuss word, but it means hello. Am I right? Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then God often, goodbye, correct? God often? A-F-T-E-N? No? Okay, I gotta have some practice. But ja,
Yeah.
yes, ja. Okay, see, I'm getting it. So, Duke, I'm going to catch up with you sooner or later. And then I'm going to teach you some Ebonics in Swahili, so then we can really be ready. Know what I'm saying? We're going to talk about Mama Nim. You know Mama Nim?
Yeah.
You do know Mama Nim, okay. Well, some of y'all know Mama Nim. I'll share later who Mama Nim are. But anyway, there are language barriers, but we can bridge that gap just by learning from each other. Duke talked about order and chaos, and he talked about something near to my heart is the Big Bang Theory. My husband and I are real Big Bang Theory fans. How many of you like Big Bang Theory? He's such a fan that he saw at an estate sale recently this big plaque, you know, of the naked man standing there with all these different things. And then when he got it home, he realized the man was really naked. So he couldn't put it up because our grandchildren might not, they might have comments to make. So it's this great big picture he doesn't know what to do with. So, but since Duke talked about the Big Bang, I may put it in Duke's office. Is that okay? He talked about Adam and Eve and the fall from grace, from order to chaos, and discovering self-consciousness. I really enjoyed watching that sermon. I learned so much, and it made so much sense. But every Sunday when I get home from church, my mom says, how was service? How was service? Now, at the top of the bulletin, it says Sunday spiritual celebration, but she never asked me how was celebration. She says, how was service? Because typically, we call this service, this program, a service, our worship service, our Sunday service. Well, why do you suppose that is? Because we're all here to serve. Our musicians serve you with beautiful music that sets the tone for this day, that lifts your spirits. Music is the message. We try to come up with things that will give you something to go home and think about, that will give you something to make your life better, and our own, because we are preaching to ourselves, and we're barking to the choir. Marion Wright Edelman said, service is the rent we pay for being. It is the very purpose of life and not something you do in your spare time. That's service. Life is for giving and forgiving. So take a note of that word, forgiving, like forgiveness. Life is forgiving, and that's my talk today. So what does that mean? Well, there are several things that Duke talked about, and he started out with science. How many of you ever heard of Sir Isaac Newton? Well, in my career life, I was studying to be an air traffic controller at one time, and one of the things we had to learn were all of the aerodynamic principles, and we had to master those. Well, Newton had 3 laws of motion. So you probably know some of these from high school. The 3 laws of motion, the first one is inertia. Once an object starts in a certain direction, it requires an equal or greater force to stop it from moving. And then the second is weight and mass. Force of an object is a combination of its mass and acceleration. But the most important law of Newton's laws, natural laws of physics and mechanics in aviation, is Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So that law, while it's also a mechanical law, is a natural law. It's a nature law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Parmenides, the Greek father known to be the father of metaphysics, came up with this idea that science, or matter and energy, are connected to the natural world, the spiritual laws. Meta means seeing something from a higher level. It means seeing something from a different or higher perspective. And physics is a science of matter and energy. Metaphysics. We study metaphysics in the Bible class. We study the metaphysical Bible interpretation of the scriptures. It examines the fundamental nature of reality. It answers 2 questions. What is there and what is it like? What is there? What's there? And what is it like? How does it behave? How does it act? How does it respond? The spiritual law, I talked about the scientific law, and Duke talked about how the 2 come together, science and spirit and spirituality. The spiritual law is the law of giving and receiving, the law of reciprocity, or the law of compensation. As you give, so shall you receive. When I was working on my lesson, I came across a story that I want to share with you that really got my attention. The title of the story is What Goes Around Comes Around. Inspirational story of giving and receiving. One day, a man saw an old lady stranded on the side of the road, but even in the dim light of the day, he could see that she needed help. So he pulled over in front of her Mercedes and got out. His Pontiac was still sputtering when he approached her, and even with the big smile on his face, she was a little worried about who this was, for no one had stopped to help her, and she had been there for more than an hour. Was he going to harm her? He didn't look safe. In fact, he looked poor and hungry in her eyes. He could see that she was frightened, and standing out there in the cold, he knew how she felt. It was those chills which only fear can put you in. He said, "I'm here to help you. Why don't you wait in the car where it's warm? By the way, ma'am, my name is Brian Anderson." Well, all she had was a flat tire, he discovered, but for an old lady, that was bad enough. Brian crawled under the car looking for a place to put the jack, skinning his knees, his knuckles, a time or 2. But soon he was able to change the tire, but he had to get dirty, and his hands really hurt. As he was tightening up the lug nuts, she rolled down the window and began to talk to him. She told him that she was from St. Louis and was just passing through on her way home. She couldn't thank him enough for being so kind and fixing the flat. Brian just smiled as he closed her trunk. The lady asked how much she owed him. Any amount would have been all right with her. He said that he never thought twice about asking for any money. This was helping someone in need. And God knows there were plenty who had given him a hand in the past. He had lived his whole life that way, and it never occurred to him to act in any other way. He told her that if she really wanted to pay him, the next time she saw someone who needed help, she could give that person the assistance they needed. And then he added, "And think of me." He waited until she started her car and drove off. It had been a cold, depressing, wet day, but he felt good as he headed for home, disappearing into the twilight. A few miles down the road, the lady saw a small cafe. She went in to grab a bit to eat and take the chill off before she made the last leg of her trip home. It was a dingy-looking restaurant, not inviting at all. Outside were 2 old gas pumps. The whole scene was unfamiliar to her. The waitress came over with a big smile and brought a clean towel for the lady to wipe her wet hair. She was sweet. She was 8 months pregnant at least. One that even being on her feet for the whole day couldn't erase. The lady must have been in pain, the old lady thought. She noticed that the waitress never lost her smile. She never let the strain and aches of her pregnancy change her attitude. The old lady wondered how someone who had so little could be so giving to a stranger. Then she remembered Brian. After the lady finished her meal, she paid with a $100 bill. The waitress quickly went to get change for her $100 bill, but the old lady had slipped right out the door. She was gone by the time the waitress came back. The waitress wondered where the lady could be, and then she noticed something written on a napkin. "You don't owe me anything. I have been there too. Somebody helped me out the way I'm helping you. If you really want to pay me back, here is what you do. Do not let this chain of love end with you." The waitress was brought to tears as she read the note. And then when she saw what was under the napkin, she could hardly contain herself. There were 4 $100 bills. Well, there were tables to clear, sugar bowls to fill, and people to serve, but the waitress made it through another day. That night, when she got home, she climbed into bed. She was thinking about the money and what the lady had written, and how could this lady have known how much she and her husband needed it? With the baby due next month, it was going to be really hard. She knew how worried her husband had been, and as he lay sleeping next to her, she gave him a soft kiss and whispered, soft and low, "Everything is going to be all right. I love you, Brian Anderson." Everything we do, every good deed we do comes back to us. It may not come back in the form that we gave it. We should never give with any expectation, because there's something good that is going to come to you for every good you do. That story really touched me deeply. It's a story that Myrtle Fillmore would call the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Brian had a thought in mind to help, and it produced help that he probably never would have anticipated from this little old lady. We have the same power to change the world, one person that we meet at a time. All we need to do is help somebody. This morning, when I was on my way here, as usual, getting off 71 Highway on Emmanuel Cleaver Boulevard, there was a gentleman with a sign. And I always keep something in my glove compartment. And if I don't, maybe a snack bar or a bottle of water, but something. And so I did. I handed him a bill, and he was very grateful and said, "God bless you." And the car next to me, a blue Honda station wagon, SUV. She rolls down her window, and she hands him a bill. And she had the biggest smile on her face. You can't give without receiving. It feels good to help somebody. Never with any thought of yourself, because then you haven't given it. You still are holding on to it. You're attached to it. Never with any attachment, but for the good of giving. There's a song we sang when I was growing up. You can't beat God's giving, no matter how hard you try. The more you give, the more God gives to you. Just keep on giving, because it's really true that you can't beat God's giving. That idea changed my life. I always seem to have enough of whatever I need. And in fact, I often have more than enough so I can share. It's not necessarily money. It's not about money. It's not about the bank account. It's not about any of those things. It's whatever I need. My needs are provided. It may be friendship. Someone comes along and does a good deed for me that I never would have expected. Someone comes along and offers to help me with my mother, just out of the blue, that I never would have expected. You never know where your good is going to come from. Just give, and God gives it back to you. In Matthew 7:12, we read, "Therefore all things, whatever you want done to you, do unto others, for this is the law and the prophets." And Eric Butterworth, in Discover the Power Within You, talks about this law of compensation when he says, the principle of action and reaction, give and receive, is do as you would be done by, think as you would like to experience, love and you shall be loved, forgive and you shall be forgiven. Jesus did not announce this as a new law. He didn't create laws. He simply discovered them as part of the divinity of humankind, and that's the divinity that is in all of us. So it's soccer to poverty time. Give. There are people walking the street, living under bridges. Think of them. As Brian told the old lady, when you do give, think of me. Matthew 25:35 says, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothes. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you visited me. Grady Wayne Sr. was that kind of person. We never had a stranger. Everybody was family. There were people who lived in our little bungalow basement. I thought they were relatives. They fed them, they clothed them, they never asked for a dime, and they got them on their feet. He would be down in the drinking hole in the bottoms and pick up some other person who didn't have a place to go and bring them home for my mother to fix them some food and make them a bed downstairs. I grew up in a kind and loving environment where everybody was family. And we in our society need to get back to that. Jesus said, what you do for the least of them, you do for me, my brothers and sisters. There are plenty of opportunities for service right here in this church, and even more in this community. If you want to know how you can serve, check with Christine Garvey. She has a long list. We can always use your help. In the words of Tagore, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. Let's take that into meditation.